listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome.
Good morning, all you people out there. I'm delighted to know that you're listening to Second Wind again this morning. It is a beautiful, hot day in Texas. And so we spend a lot of time inside here. But today you have a wonderful guest to listen to, and she's going to open some doors for you because she is a storyteller. I love that. When I first read that, I went, oh, well, her name is Paula Munier, and she is an author, editor, literary agent, and a teacher. She is the author of Mercy Care mystery series of books, as well as numerous nonfiction books. She writes a lot. The first book of the Mercy Care series, A Borrowing of Bones, was nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark Award and named the Dog Wise Book of the Year. In the area of nonfiction, Munier has written 3 books to help other inspiring authors, which I love that. Thank you. You have such a generous heart in helping people grow. You have The Plot Perfect, The Writer's Guild to Beginning, and Writing with Quiet Hands. So anyway, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm delighted to have you on Second Wind.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, I have listened and researched you. I thought it was fascinating how in some of the literature that you gave me in preparing for you, you were kind of a lonely child because you were the only child, and you lived, your dad was in the service army, and so you moved around quite a bit, 12 years. You said you had 12 different schools before you got to college. But it sort of set you found solace in being able to write and play with your dog.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of followed you through your life. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, books were my friends, and my dog was my friend. It didn't matter where we lived, whether I had any real friends or not. Until I made some, I had my books and I had my dog, and I still have my books and my dogs, to keep me company. Of course, I raised 3 children and I have grandchildren, and that's all great. But kids grow up and leave home, and so it's back to books and dogs.
Yes, it is. Now I love it that you put it. I live alone, and so I have my precious Mika, which is a golden retriever blonde. And so she's a beautiful dog. And my goodness, I can't imagine life without her. She's so completes us, don't they? Our dogs.
They're fabulous. They're the best friends. They listen. They love you. They, no judgment, Yes, they're just the best. And they're loyal and true. I mean, one of my dogs actually saved my life. I had a great dog named Shakespeare who was, gone to that great dog kennel in the sky. But when I was doing my yoga teacher training, and I would come home so tired because I was working all day as an acquisitions editor. And then I'd go from work to the studio and do all this yoga. And I was 55 years old. I was not young by any means. Yeah. So that was so exhausting. And then on the weekends, I would do 10 hours of yoga a day. And I came home after one of those long days, and I put the tea on and I went to sleep. And Shakespeare never barked, but he barked and barked and barked. He kept waking me up. And I said, "Go away, Shakespeare, go away." And I ignored him, and he wouldn't stop. And that's when I realized I got up, the kitchen was on fire.
Oh, I just knew you were going there. Oh my gosh.
And he saved my life. I mean, that's how great dogs are.
Oh, yes. Now, you have been in the journalism world for years. You've worked in publishing. I think you've done every job there was. So
yes, I have.
What was the call? I mean, I know that's where your career, once you were laid off in your 50s, right?
Right.
And you
right.
talk about how dark that time was, and so unprepared you were for that. And so it just, how did you get the energy starting over at that age and the confidence to go out and find yourself a new world?
Well, you know, I've been in part of the book world, and I started off as a reporter decades ago. And, I became a writer and an editor, first with newspapers and magazines, and then with books. And I found I loved the book business. I loved everything about it. I was an acquisitions editor for many years until I got laid off unceremoniously at 55. Yeah. And, I had a kid in college. I was a single mom. I didn't know what to do, because at 55, this was before the COVID, before, everybody wanted, there were so many jobs available. Now, although there's still not that many jobs in publishing. Publishing's always been a hard road to hoe. And I didn't want to move to New York, which was my only option. I was living in New England and I loved it. And I didn't know what to do. I thought, well, I'll just go back to writing. So apparently I wrote a very pathetic blog about my dog, Shakespeare, the same dog who was at the time, who was dying of cancer, and there was nothing I could do. And I had no job, and I was 55 and I had a kid in college. I was just a mess. And so a friend of mine called me. She read the blog and she said, "Oh my God," she said, "you need something to do." So she gave me something to do. And she was my literary agent. And I knew her from publishing. And she said, "Why don't you become an agent?" And I said, "I couldn't do that because, I am not a salesperson. I'm an editorial person." Right. And she says, "Oh, you could do it. It's just like, when you're an acquisitions editor or a publishing house, you have to take the projects you'd like to buy for the house and pitch them at publishing board to get every company to buy in to the project." She says, "It's just like that. You're just pitching the acquisitions editors, and you used to be one. You know how to do that. It's not hardcore salesmanship," which I knew I was incapable of, right?
Right.
And so I did. I joined her agency. That was about 11, 12 years ago. And I became an agent, and it gave me not only my own business to run, which I had never done. I'd been part of the corporate world forever. And that was fun. It was challenging, but it was fun. It was nice not to have a boss and only myself, right?
Yeah.
And it gave me time to write, and to write what I wanted to write, which was mysteries. I'd always wanted to be a mystery writer. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise, although it didn't really feel that way at the time. It felt like, hell.
Yeah, right. Those moments do. Don't think, "Oh, I don't want to be here." Okay, now, as I'm looking, you have written how many books? It seems you started in 2016, but we really know you began before that writing. Right. Because you started, your ninth grade teacher said you needed to be a writer, which Daddy immediately said no.
Well, when she called my mother, and Mrs. Barron's was her name, she called my mother and told my mother I should be a writer. And of course, I was 14. And so my mother went on this campaign to make me a writer. And of course, when you're 14, the last thing you want to do is anything your mother tells you to do. Right. So I fought it for a long time. And then finally, I found myself in college, broke. And I thought, this was the age of the magazines, right? This was 70s. When everybody read magazines all the time. And I thought, well, I'll just make a little extra money. I'll write for magazines, having no idea, what the challenge that would be. So I picked my favorite magazine, which was Cosmopolitan. Yes, I know. And there you go. The Helen Gurley Brown Cosmopolitan, right? And I wrote an article and I sent it off. Well, this is not how it's supposed to work. First of all, they don't even take projects that aren't from agents, but it didn't matter. I sold it. I sold it to Cosmopolitan. So I thought, how hard could this be? This is so easy. Of course, I didn't sell anything else for a long time, but that gave me the confidence. It made me think that at 19, I'm a writer. I'm a published writer, Cosmopolitan. So that was my start, and it gave me a real leg up. So, and then one of the lessons there is, never be afraid to give it a shot, Yeah,
you give it a shot. Yeah. So yes, you could go in, or you could advertise or promote yourself as having an article in Cosmopolitan.
Right. And that's how I got my first real job. What I did at 19, yes, I published Cosmo, but I also I was so depressed at college. I was miserable and lonely at college. And so I married my first husband. That's how depressed I was. And so before I knew it, or in my early 20s, I had 2 kids. And then, he was gone and I had 2 kids to support and no way of doing that. Mm-hmm. But I had these clips, Cosmo clips and some other clips I had gotten along the way. And I parlayed that into a job as an editorial assistant at a business magazine, first female editorial person there. And I just worked hard, and publishing was starting with that job has just been really good to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, your history has been phenomenal, really. But you are a very gifted person in your ability to write and cheerful, and you just do nice things. Tell us about the exercise.
Well, I take care of my mother who lives with me, and I took care of my father who died during COVID. And when I was 55, I became a yoga teacher. And I became a yoga teacher because I went to Kripalu. Now, Kripalu is this wellness center out in the Berkshires in Massachusetts. And I had lived in Santa Cruz, which is like a very woo-woo place. And I had heard of yoga, but I thought, no. And then I found myself at Kripalu. I was taking a Julia Cameron class. Julia Cameron wrote The Artist's Way, one of my favorite books, right?
Yes, definitely.
And so she was doing a seminar there. And so I said to my girlfriend, who was also a writer, Susan Reynolds, my dearest friend, and we went to see Julia Cameron. And because it was a wellness center, they had all this yoga and it was free. And if it's free, I'll try it.
Yes. And
so I tried it and I loved it. And I came back home, and another friend of mine, Michelle Dorsey, who's now one of my clients, just had her first book, not her first book, but a new mystery come out called Gone But Not Forgotten. Anyway, I had her tell me, if you liked Kripalu yoga, you should go to this studio and take yoga. So I did. And what I loved about yoga was, even at 55, I felt 10 years younger after every class. And I wanted to know why. So I did really. So I said, this is great. My body feels younger. I feel younger. And I took my yoga teacher training and I got qualified to teach seniors. And now I teach chair yoga to seniors, including dementia patients. And I think yoga, I'm a big fan of yoga because it's done so much for me and for other people. Even my husband, who, would poo-poo yoga, after a couple bad backs, he's like, oh, I said, just try this. And it works. Of course, it just works. That's why I'm a big fan of it.
Yes. I was introduced to Julia's work through the book that she wrote not so long ago, It's Never Too Late to Begin Again. Yeah. I jumped on that with both feet and both hands and have done a couple workshops with it as coaching. And it's a great book for women in later life that they have to start over. And so whatever the cause is, can just be boredom. But we always
that's a big thing. Curiosity and activity. Those are the keys, I think, to staying young.
Yes. So anyway, that's how I became, but she's in Santa Fe now. Yeah. So I understand.
Yeah. No, she's great. I took 2 workshops with her, 30 years apart. And she's just as great the second time, she's just great. And all of her books are really so inspiring, whether you're a writer, whether you're any kind of creative person, whether you're just looking for an outlet for your creativity. She's great. Yeah.
So why did you decide to start doing your yoga for, I have taken seated yoga. I did that when I lived in Santa Fe. And so it was a very short time though that I lived there. So anyway, but why did you focus on seniors and those with dementia?
Well, I think my mother doesn't actually have dementia, but she's a little muddled. And so, plus if you teach older people, whether they have dementia or not, many times if you go to a class, there will be people who are in wheelchairs, right?
That's
or who
true.
have mobility issues.
Yes.
So chair yoga is great. And when I teach it, I have a class full of people. Some are in wheelchairs, some are seated and not so mobile, so they have to remain seated. They have trouble getting up and down. Some are getting up and down. So I just have to modify every pose depending on your level of mobility.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me how you got into your mystery writing, because that started later in your life, but why did you get into your mystery writing?
Well, I always had a secret yen to be a mystery writer. You know, I loved mysteries as a kid. You know, going back a long time, you're talking, Nancy Drew and Trixie Belden and the Bobbsey twins, and the Hardy Boys, right? I loved all those books, Encyclopedia Brown. I loved all those books when I was a kid. And then I discovered somewhere along the line, I had a friend who was English and she gave me Sherlock Holmes.
Oh, yes.
And then I read all my mother's mysteries. She read mysteries, Agatha Christie and, all the sort of golden age mysteries, Ellery Queen and Rex Stout and Nero Wolfe and all those golden age mysteries, which I loved. And I read them all as a kid. I was like 12 years old. I was always a big reader. And I just loved mysteries. I continue to love mysteries and thrillers and crime fiction in general. And I always wanted to be a mystery writer, but I didn't, I was raising kids and I was an acquisitions editor. And when you're an acquisitions editor, you spend all day long with books, right? And a lot of that creative spark that you have to treasure and protect as a writer, I used it up every day as an editor. An editor is like being the midwife, right? You're not the mother having the baby, but you're the midwife helping babies be born. And so I helped a lot of baby books be born. And then when I wasn't an acquisitions editor anymore, when I got laid off and became an agent, then I had more time because, yes, I do some midwifery as an agent. I help clients get their books ready to sell, but it's mostly not that. It's more selling and negotiating and deals and that sort of thing, right? So I had more time. I had more free space in my brain. And I wrote this book called The Writer's Guide to Beginnings. And they'd asked me to write it, Writer's Digest Books, now part of Penguin Random House. They asked me to write it because I've been doing these workshops showing people how to write a great opening, because if you don't write a great opening, you don't sell the book. Right. There's an old adage in publishing, first page sells the book, last page sells the next book. And so I was doing these workshops, right? And what happened was I needed a chapter for this book that showed people how to revise and rework and use different tips and techniques and tools to rewrite and create this great first chapter, this great. And so I couldn't use anybody else's first chapter. I do have a lot of great openings in the book, some of the best openings ever that you and I were very familiar with, readers would know. But I needed a chapter that I had to write myself because I needed to put it through its paces over the course of the book. So I thought, okay, I'll just write this chapter. I'll make something up, right? And I had just done this fundraiser for Mission Canine Rescue and out of Texas, Mission Canine Rescue. And what they do is they make sure that the defense contractor dogs who serve in the military as bomb sniffing dogs and guard dogs, all those drug sniffing dogs, all these kinds of dogs, mostly bomb sniffing dogs though. Oftentimes, if they're Army dogs, the Army does a pretty good job, better now, of taking care of them once they've done their service. But if they're defense contractor dogs, they can end up in kill shelters.
Oh, sad.
And what Mission Canine Rescue does is find those dogs, rescue them, and make sure they get good homes. And so I just done this fundraiser for them. And I met all these fabulous dogs and their handlers. So I was inspired by that. I was inspired by being a military brat myself. So I wrote this opening chapter and I threw in everything I loved. I threw in a female veteran from Afghanistan wars. I threw in a bomb sniffing dog. I threw in Vermont because I love New England. I threw in Shakespeare. I threw in everything I loved, right? And I wrote this opening chapter as an exercise for this book on beginnings for writers. And my agent said to me, the same woman who saved my life and gave me a job when nobody else would, she said, well, you should write that book. That's a great chapter. So I did. And I'm writing book 6 now. So.
Yeah. So you're working on one now that's going to be coming out.
Yes, the 6th book in the series I'm working on now. The 5th book in the series, Home at Night, comes out in October. And it's a Halloween book. It's fun to write about Halloween.
Oh, yeah. Everybody loves that holiday.
Yeah. It's a big holiday in publishing too.
Oh, it is.
Stories. Yes. Bookstores usually have lots of promotions around Halloween. So
yeah,
it's a good thing to write about.
Yes. So how do you prepare okay, let's say I'm a writer, a little writer, and I'm just getting my feet wet. And what do I do if I want to test or know if my writing is good enough to publish? Do I go to somebody in the publishing industry? Do I ask my friends, do you like this, like this? How do I do that? What do I do?
Well, people always ask me when I teach a class or a workshop, they'll come up to me and they'll say, who's the best? Who's going to get published first? Who's the best writer in the class? And I always say, I don't know, because, honestly, you don't know, because the writers who get published are the ones who finish, revise, and persist.
Okay.
And a lot of times, we all know people, wildly talented people who burn out or they quit or they go on to something else. I was in this writers group, and I advise everyone to become a member of a writers group, preferably writers in the same genre as you. And you can meet those writers. You just join your genre association, like the Mystery Writers of America that has chapters everywhere. They have great chapters in Texas, and or Romance Writers of America, whatever genre you're writing, you should join that organization and get to know those people, and they will help you. They'll become your friends and they'll become your cheerleaders, So I was in this writing group, and there were all women and one guy, and the women were very sort of sophisticated, literate, they were like librarians and academics, very, very posh in terms of literature. And the guy was this former Marine who was really rough around the edges, and his very presence annoyed them, And so every week, and he was, he had a long way to go writing wise, long way to go. Every week he came, and every week they tore him apart. They tore his writing apart. And every week he was a Marine. He went home, he rewrote. And out of all those women, he became one of my first clients, and I sold 4 books for him.
Wow.
So, and they couldn't believe that but that's because he never gave up. And he listened to feedback, So I would advise everybody, if you really want to do this, you have to have writer friends, preferably. It's kind of like buying a house, you don't want to buy the biggest, best house on the block. You don't want to be the biggest, best writer in your group. You want to be the fixer-upper writer. So that the other writers should be better published than you, and, farther along on their journey as writers, because then you can really learn from them, and they can help you and mentor you. You don't want to get in a group where, you're just writing for their opinion, as opposed to writing to hit the bar that the publishing industry has to break through. You want to hit that bar. So you need to get with people. And the best way to find those people is to join your genre association. They always have local chapters. And if you live in the middle of nowhere like I do, you can join the online chapter.
Right. Yes, right. Now, what about if you're close to junior colleges or something like that? Is that a good place to go?
Absolutely. The very first class I took was a class with John Kennedy. This is out in California at a community college. It was a, extension night class. And my first writers group was made up of people. After that class was over, we kept going. And they're all published now. This is talking about decades later, but everybody's published. We still are friends, You really need writer friends, because no one else is going to understand why you want to sit alone in a room for hours and hours and hours by yourself, making up imaginary people doing imaginary things. You can't expect your family and your so-called civilian friends to understand why you want to do that. So you have to have writer friends.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you're starting to write a story, do you know your destination? Or is it that you had this idea about this and you just start writing?
Well, one of the reasons I didn't write mysteries for so long, even though I wanted to, was because I didn't know how to plot. I wasn't a good plotter. Mm-hmm. And then I became an editor. And over the course of being an editor, I was helping other writers plot their books, right? The midwifery thing. And the first writing book I was asked to write was a book on plot. And so after I wrote that book on plot, teaching other writers how to plot, I thought, okay, you better put your money where your mouth is. You can't let plotting be a deterrent to writing a mystery. You just wrote a book on plot. So that's what I used. I used my own advice and I plotted my novel. So.
Okay. So when does one go to a person to your company in their process? After they do lots of writing, they progress, and then they decide, well, my friends say, or my group has encouraged me enough. So is this when I would seek out somebody like your company?
Well, sure. I mean, I think the best thing to do is once you've got a project that you think is ready to go, or close enough that you could shop it, then you should go to a conference. They have conferences for every kind of writers, every kind of writing. They have mystery writing conferences and they have romance writing. I would find one of those conferences, and they have them everywhere. They have them regionally. I would find one of those, and there are usually agents there, and they're looking for clients writing a particular genre. There's also a lot of online stuff you can do, and you can follow a lot of agents and writers, agents and authors and publishing people were on Twitter. They were on Twitter. Now they're going to Threads because, Twitter. Anyway, so
Threads? I haven't heard of Threads.
Threads is the new Twitter.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so yes, it's called Threads. And a lot of people, publishing people especially, are migrating from Twitter to Threads. So they make it very easy for you to do. If you're already on Instagram, they'll just bring over all your people. But anyway, so there are some online resources as well. But I think it's always good to go in person and meet some people. And then you'll learn, usually these conferences have classes on workshops on how to pitch your project, and you'll meet some agents, you'll meet some other people pitching their projects. So I think that's the best way. And it's fun.
Yeah. And do you go there as a company to groups like that, to events like that? Or is it not necessary for you to do that?
Well, I mean, I don't have to go anymore. When I was a new agent,
I know the boss.
When I was a new agent, I went, especially because I was looking for clients, and now I have a full stable of clients. But even before I became an agent, when I was an editor who secretly wanted to write a mystery novel, I joined Mystery Writers of America here in New England, the New England chapter, and they have a conference called the New England Crime Bake every year. And I joined that committee. I volunteered, which is a great way to volunteer for one of these conferences. And I got to know everybody, and I got to meet all my favorite mystery writers, and I got to learn so much. And now, I've been with that committee forever. And I go as an agent too. And I hear pitches from people who come to the conference. And I've signed several clients from that conference and others.
When I was reading about you last night, you talked about reading, getting ideas from other people's books. I think if I'm saying it right, it helped you spur on and create new ideas in the direction you were writing.
Right.
And I thought, I would have never thought of doing that.
Well, I think that your best teachers are the writers who are better than you are, you know?
Yes.
I mean, you can teach people to write. Can you teach people to write? That's a big question. Can you really do it? I mean, I do think that writing, my daughter is an opera singer, for example. Okay, she's an opera singer and she has perfect pitch.
Oh, lucky girl.
But because she thinks that way, she hears that way. She is not tone deaf, you know? Right. And I think that there's an affinity for language or storytelling that you have to be a writer. I don't know if you can teach that, you know, just like you can't teach someone who's tone deaf not to be, at least if you can, I don't know how. But, you know, that I think that's important, that you have that affinity, and you have to love books and you have to love reading and you have to, you know, if you don't love to read, why would you even want to be a writer? I don't, you know, you need to write. You know, Stephen King says, for every book you write, you should read 100 books. And I think that's about right.
Wow.
Yeah. So you have to read a lot, because reading brings you to writing. That's my theory. And then you can learn the craft of it, right? But it's like being a woodworker. You have to love the feel of the wood under your hand. You have to love the smell, you know, you have to love it. And then you can learn how to do it better. It's the same thing with writing. You have to love language and storytelling, and then you can learn to do it better. I can't teach you to love it.
Right.
You know, and then you'll learn, like whenever you have an issue that I had to write in one of my books, The Hiding Place, my editor wanted it to be a cold case story, right? A cold case murder that the heroine solves, Mercy Carr. And I didn't want to do it because I was worried that if you're writing a story about a murder that takes place, you know, many years before, even though she's solving the case in the present, you still have to do some flashbacks to the past. It's hard to write it without doing that. And flashbacks can be dangerous because the reader gets on page 1, they're ready for the story, they're ready for the journey, they want to read to the end. They don't want to go back in time. They want to keep moving forward. And so I'm very skeptical of flashbacks, and rightfully so, because they can take the reader back, and sometimes the reader will put the story down and not come back. So I thought, I don't want to write a cold case story. I don't want any flashbacks in my book. And I thought, okay, but I have to learn to do this. Other writers do it, better writers than me. So I kept writing and reading and reading. And I don't know if you know, there's a wonderful writer from Texas, Agatha, who writes a wonderful series. I think it's called the Highway 59 or 69 series. Anyway, about a Black Texas Ranger.
Oh.
Wonderful. She's a wonderful writer. She also writes for Hollywood. Agatha Locke is her name. And so I read her books. And when I read the books about the Texas Ranger, she used flashbacks in her story.
Oh.
And she did it so artfully. And I knew I couldn't do it as much as she did it and do it that artfully, but it was a lesson for me, right? So your best teachers are really the best writers, you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, we are coming very close to the end of our time together, which I'm not sure if I'm ready, but but anyway, you have shared so much today. It's been a pleasure to have you on Second Wind. And I think a lot of people that begin in writing are going through their second wind, perhaps, and needing a new day. So anyway, I thank you very much for being here. It's just been a pleasure. So as you are moving into 2024, are there any exciting things you want to tell us? Share.
I have a new book coming out, you know, like I said, the Halloween book, Home at Night. And I'm writing book 6. And I've just become a natural resources steward for the state of New Hampshire, which is very cool. Yes, it's very cool. So what New Hampshire does is they want volunteers to help them. You know, we have 80% forest here, right?
Yes,
so we need beautiful. It is beautiful. We need people to help with the trails and help count birds and do all kinds of things, right?
Wow. For
the nature of the state, to maintain the biodiversity and the ecology of the state. And so what they do is they don't want just they want to train their volunteers so their volunteers are educated. So you can take this class through the University of New Hampshire and become a natural resources steward. So I've done that, and now I'm helping do a demonstration garden at the state nursery. And we have 19 acres of woods here. I don't know what to do with, but now I'm learning. So I think that's really the key, whether it's writing mysteries or learning to stand on your head in yoga at 55, or,
yes.
or learning, how to make your garden even more, filling it with native plants, whatever it is. I really think that's the key to your third act, is staying curious and active and alive.
Yeah. I agree. You do gardening. That's also, yeah. Do you eat what you grow? Or is it flowers and other things?
It used to be only flowers till COVID. And then I thought, I better do a garden in case, because we were worried about food shortages at the beginning. And so my husband, I said to him, I think we better grow some food. I don't know how to do this, but you make me some raised beds. So he built me this beautiful space with raised beds and arbors and enclosed to keep out the deer and all this. And I'm like, oh boy, I better grow some food now. So I do. We have corn and squash and tomatoes and okra and lettuce and cucumbers.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, you're ready for whatever would come your way.
We have to be ready, right?
I know. And you do live in a beautiful part of the United States. I've had occasion to be up there, and I thoroughly enjoy any of my time. So it's beautiful. So again, I guess this is it. I thank you very much. I'm not going to start talking again. But anyway, thank you for being here. It's just been a pleasure to have you on Second Wind.
Well, thank you so much. It was lovely to be here.
Thank you. Now, listeners, I have always asked you to really do something for me that will help spread the word. And that is tell them about this wonderful interview with Paula Munier. And you will enlighten their world and make, if they are not a reader, they can become a reader. So be sure and spread the word with your friends so that we can get more books and more people reading out there. Thank you for being here today. It's been a pleasure knowing that you've been listening. See you next week.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.